Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, sir. Our Mr. Guru, sir, Guru Tiaga. Dean, sir. Venkatesan,
Hello.
sir.
My tone is audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And sir, Guru Tiaga. He's working in Orly, Australia, sir. He's a design engineer.
Hello, sir. Dean, Mr. Sandil Kumar, sir, Mr. S. Venkatesan, sir, HODS, DCT. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And also thanks to my friend Stalin. We are all like batchmates in college.
Okay.
So are we live now? Can we go? Can we start?
Sir, I request our Dean, sir, to share few words, sir, before starting the event.
Okay.
So 59 participants are in live.
Yeah. Continue, Stalin.
Okay, sir. Very good afternoon to you all. First of all, I welcome my beloved and dynamic Dean of our institute, Dr. T. Sendil Kumar, for giving opportunity to conduct online class for the young graduates and technocrats and engineers. Thank you, sir. I welcome you, sir. And welcome our chief guest, Mr. Tiaga, Guru Tiaga, engineering consultant, for his eminent speech related to pressure equipments in oil and gas industry. I welcome you, the chief guest, Mr. Guru sir, and I welcome you, my HOD Dr. Venkatesan sir, Department of Petrochemical Technology, DIT campus, Anna University, and I welcome all the participants who are all participate in the technical program conducted by Department of Petrochemical Technology, Anna University BIT campus. I welcome all the participants. Now I request our beloved Dean sir to give the inaugural address. Sir, please, sir. Dean sir. Dean sir, is it audible to you? Venkatesan sir, is it audible to you?
Yes, sir. It's audible for me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you,
I hear your voice.
Okay.
Dean sir voice is not audible.
I think, sir, Sendil sir, you can share a few of your words here, sir. Hello.
Sir, your voice is not audible. உங்க வாய்ஸ் கேட்கல சார். கேட்கல சார். அங்க சார் Venkatesan sir, is it audible? Dean sir.
Now it is. Now it is audible, sir.
Okay, sir. Now you can start. You can start.
Sir, Dean sir, it is not audible, sir. நீங்க பேசுறது எங்களுக்கு கேட்கல, sir. Mic, I think mic is turned off for Dean sir's mic.
சரிங்க சார். சரிங்க சார். Okay, sir. Thank you. Sir Venkatesan sir, you can say some few words regarding about our chief guest. We can start
Okay.
our program.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, all the participants are in.
Yeah,
Stalin sir,
almost,
all the.
almost 89 participants are.
Okay, okay,
entering
okay.
now.
Okay, okay. Then thank you, sir. We will start today's session, sir. Sir, on behalf of Anna University and University College of Engineering, Bharatdasan Institute of Technology, I welcome today's chief guest, Guru Tyaga, sir, on behalf of Anna University. I welcome you, sir,
Thank you.
for this live webinar. So I welcome all the participants from across the India and across the globe. Today is going to be an starting day for our department webinar. We have started initiating series of webinars from today onwards. So the first lecture is given by Mr. I think Guru Tyaga, sir. So I welcome you, sir, again. And Guru Tyaga sir has a professional engineer with 20 years of experience in oil and gas industry, and he is working as a consultant in engineering, various engineering companies, and he is presently associated with Worley in Australia, Perth. So his area of expertise, the design and engineering of mechanical equipment, oil and gas industry. He is a professional engineer of engineers of Australia, and he can be contacted with gkthiya@outlook.com, and he has a rich experience in working with vessels, different kind of pressure vessels, which is associated with gas and industry. So on behalf of our department and in the university, I welcome again for this session, sir. So I now present to you to Guru Tyaga, sir, to take over and start the session. Stalin, sir, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Venkatesan, sir. Really, the Department of Petrochemical was started in the year of 1999. And our students are most over in all central government companies and foreign companies they are working at present. So with this a few words, now I request our chief guest, Mr. Guru Tyaga, please continue your session, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Venkatesan.
Sir, a few words, sir. Sir, before starting our expert, I would like to introduce few words for our department. Can I continue, Dr. Stalin? Can I say? Can I?
Yes, please.
Sir, actually, our department, the program, BTech program in petrochemical technology, was started in the year of 1999. Almost 15 batches are passed out, and they are placed in almost across the globe, all the companies, right from US, UK, and well-known companies, even Shell. Almost all the companies are both in upstream and downstream. They're placed, and our department is doing wonderful work, and our department, our program has been accredited by National Board of Accreditation, and it has accreditation is a trademark which has been given for it's a certification given to individual every student which can travel all over the world and get it placed. So that is the accreditation. It's a very important for the students and to go for around the world and work in various kinds of companies. So our students, most of the Gulf countries are working in almost all the Gulf leading industries, both in upstream and downstream. And our students are doing wonderful work in research also in leading US universities and European universities. And there are more entrepreneurs. They started their companies and they are recruiting our students, their juniors. They are started recruiting them. So that is the credit we are getting from our alumni. So with this few words, I welcome again Mr. Guru Tyaga, sir, for this live webinar. Thank you, Dr. Stalin, sir, for giving this wonderful opportunity. And I hand over the session to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Venkatesan, sir. Please, Mr. Guru Tyaga, sir, please you can start your session.
Yeah.
It is hand over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. I want to thank Mr. Stalin, Mr. T. Sendil Kumar, sir, and Mr. Venkatesan, sir, for this opportunity. So to start, I just go now. Can you just confirm? Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I welcome you all for this webinar. This is on overview of pressure equipment in oil and gas industry. And myself, Guru Tyaga, I work in oil and gas industry for the past 20 years. Currently, I'm in a company called Worley Parsons. It's called Worley now. I'm based in Australia, Perth. I welcome you all for this presentation. Let's start that. Okay, agenda for today is like we'll be seeing a pep talk, a small pep talk to start with. That's challenge norm. And then before straight away going into pressure equipment overview, I thought I'll give a brief of industry, oil and gas industry overview on what a pressure equipment is and what is its history, what is the significance, and then we'll take you through the pressure equipment used in oil and gas industry. And the last is questions and answers. I'm happy to answer the questions that I can take today. If not, please contact me through my email, gktia@outlook.com. I'm more than happy to address the queries or anything that I can be helpful of. I am a member of Engineers Australia, so I have access to a lot of resources. If you think you have any queries regarding to oil and gas industry or just for any knowledge sharing, please feel free to contact me. Challenge norm, like in the oil and gas industry, what we do, I'm sure that any other industry, when they start any meeting, they just talk a pep talk. It's called safety moment. It's mostly about day-to-day safety or the safety practices in the industry or about physical well-being or mental well-being. Just say hello and see what is happening. It's mostly like anything that can help us to be a better human or to live a better way of living. That's a small pep talk we used to do before we start any meeting. Today, I picked up a topic like challenge norm. And this is a fable of 5 monkeys. It was a social experiment done in 1960s by someone by name or Stephenson. And he has established this fable of 5 monkeys based on a social experiment. And I'm just sorry, give me a minute. My mobile is kind of stuck. I'm just trying to, yeah. So what they did was they put 5 monkeys in a room and then they put a bunch of bananas on top of ladder. As soon as monkeys see banana, they try to climb and eat it. When a monkey climbs to eat a banana, all the monkeys were sprayed with cold water. And that's they said that routine. Whenever a monkey climbs a ladder, cold water was sprayed onto them. That is like setting up the norm. Like if you do this, this is going to happen. They established the norm. After some time, what they did, they completely stopped the water spray, and no monkeys tried to climb the ladder because they have a norm that if I climb, I'll be sprayed with cold water. Then proliferation. Proliferation is like rapidly expanding the norm. So what happened? They changed one of the monkey, replaced one of the monkey with a new monkey. The new monkeys tried to climb the ladder to get the banana. All other old monkeys, attacked and beat him up. So the replacement continues. They replace the second monkey with the new one, third monkey with the new one, and fourth monkey with the new one. The replacement continues. At some point of time, all the old 5 monkeys have been replaced with new monkeys. Whenever a new monkey tried to climb the ladder, the old monkeys attack and beat him. So what is the result of following the norm? Like this, the norm was set and the norm was expanded. And what if you keep following the norm? None of the original monkeys which had water sprayed onto them existed. All were replaced. So the new monkeys were never sprayed with water, and none of the monkeys climbed the ladder, and the bananas go rotten, like the bananas got spoiled. So the message is like, how do you avoid rotten bananas? Like, see, we always fall to some certain norms. We just get into our routines and we don't challenge ourselves. So if you don't want the banana to get rotten, always challenge the norm. Always look for a better way and most importantly, embrace new technologies and adopt a can-do attitude. In the industry, skill and knowledge is 30 to 40%, but what takes you forward is your attitude and your openness to embrace technologies. In my father's generation, they start in one company and end up in the same company. That was the norm. Like people who are in 60s and 70s now, they worked for one company throughout their life. In our generation, we switch companies 2-3 years. We switch companies, move on. That's the norm now. And for the 2K kids, those who are in colleges or studying in schools now, their future will be like they will have to end up doing multiple careers and multiple professions. That's how I look forward, because automation is taking over all the industrial jobs. Most of the jobs which are now busy today might get extinct in future. So the best thing to do is like embrace new technologies, keep up your mind open, have a good attitude, and prepare yourself for the future. That's the message I just wanted to share with everyone. And then we'll go to the overview of oil and gas industry. I'm just using my iPad parallel because I connected to my mobile and the screen is a bit small. So apologize if I'm seeing away from your screen. Just a disclaimer, oil and gas details discussed in this presentation is a very generic and simplified version. All the pictures, drawing are obtained from public domain, web pages, personal collections, and from industry seminars. And then I'm sure everyone is aware, you are all in petroleum department, but just I thought I'll just have a recap of what is petroleum and natural gas and how they are formed. Millions of years ago, tiny marine and animal died and got decomposed and buried deep inside the ocean. And over the years, millions of years, sand, silt, rock formed over the marine organisms. And due to pressure and heat from the overlying rock, the decomposed marine matter formed into gas. That's what we call fossil gas. And today we drill through that layers of sand and silt and reach the rock formations and take out oil and gas. What is the word petroleum? Petroleum is a Latin word. Petro means rock, oleum means oil. Therefore, it is called rock oil. Petroleum stands for oil from rock or rock oil. Petroleum is also often called as hydrocarbon in any of its form. We all know the living matter is made up of hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, majority 96%. The rest 4% is made up of smaller elements. So when over the period of decomposition or like decay, all the fossil matters, what remained in them is 99% hydrogen and carbon. So those hydrogen and carbon forms a chain and it becomes a fossil fuel. That's why we call it as a hydrocarbon. Just a recap of what petroleum and hydrocarbon is. Then oil and gas in our daily life. We use oil and gas to propel vehicles, heat buildings, and to produce electricity. In the industrial sectors, petroleum is used to derive so many industrial compounds like plastics, polyurethane, solvents. I put a small picture of what I tried to club them into one small picture. There are hundreds of products, a derivative of petroleum. Oil and gas characteristics. Typically, the oil and gas projects are of large investments, can reach billions of dollars. There is a project in Australia which we completed a few years ago. It's spelled as Gorgon, Gorgon, Gorgon. If you have time, please Google out. The cost of the project is $55 billion. It's the second most expensive project in the world, next to International Space Station. So when you talk about investments, it's really large. These are all called mega projects, mega oil and gas projects, LNG plant. Typical large project would cost around $8 to $12 billion from exploration to end of processing. Usually projects could be of scale $2 to $3 billion. So we're talking about billions of US dollars. 1 billion of US dollars, 6,000 crores. And the projects are high risk in all aspects: people safety, environment, investment, and reputation. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the 2010 oil spill. In 2010, BP's platform in Gulf of Mexico had a big explosion. One of the rig exploded, and it caused a massive oil spill. It's the most disastrous in oil and gas industry's history. Movies have been made on that disaster, Deep Horizon. If you have time, please watch it. It's a very nice movie. So what happened is one of the rig, for whatever reasons, I'm not sure, it got exploded, and 17 to 18 people were killed and hundreds were injured. Like when we talk about people's safety, this is where we end up if we don't follow proper safety measures in place, high risk industry. And we see about environment, the oil spill, like 5 million barrels of oil spilled over months, and like 100 plus kilometers coast was like completely spilled with oil. 8,000 or 9,000 numbers of marine animals and plants died. That's the impact we are talking about when oil and gas disaster happens. It impacts the environment in a large way. And in terms of reputation, like you must have heard this, BP was made responsible for this oil spill, and they were made to pay a fine of 30 to 40 billion dollar in cleanup cost, settlement cost, whatever, like total the fine penalty, I would say not fine, penalty was around 30 to 40 billion US dollar. So such is like your reputation goes at stake if you don't have a proper safety measures or proper operating procedure in place. It's a very high risk business. High rewards and returns. With the high risk, you always get high rewards and returns. Oil and gas industry is a very cash-rich industry. And the business is a long-term business. Like typically a mega projects or large projects would take at least 10 years to get the break-even price of the investment. So it's a long-term business. It's one of its characteristics. And oil and gas industry involves complex operation. It involves multidisciplinary experts like from chemical engineers, mechanicals, instrument, electrical, safety, like every discipline. It's a complex team effort. Both technical and non-technical people at the rigs and at the office, they all work together. It makes sure like the system is in place. And oil is of strategic value. Everyone knows oil is very political and very economical impact. It has got a global impact. If the oil price goes up, whatever we eat, the commodity price goes up. The oil price goes down, things usually should go down, but I don't know what happens to the time. And then I've got a small sketch of oil and gas industry sectors. Usually, like we divide the sector into 3 streams: upstream, midstream, and downstream. Upstream is about exploration and production, like they use seismic technologies to figure out where the oil formation is there, and they drill and bring the oil from subsurface to the top surface, or from the deep sea to the top of the sea. So that industry is called, and it has got a small processing facility associated with that. That industry is called upstream industry. It's basically finding the oil and bringing it to the surface. Then second part of the industry is midstream. Like not essentially every time like the oil field is near to a refinery plant. Sometimes it's far away, like 70, 80 kilometers from the shore, or far away in a desert. So you'll have to bring that explored and produced oil for further processing to a refinery. So that sector of industry, if you see a picture, you'll see oil tanker there that carries oil explored in a deep sea, say 100 kilometers from the shore, and they bring in tankers to the shore and download in refinery and do for further processing. So that sector of industry, like transportation of oil from the place of exploration to the refining place, is called midstream industry. It's more of logistics, tankers and pipelines kind of stuff. And the downstream industry is where the actual petroleum refining happens. This is where you get all the petroleum products, basically all the refineries, and further going downstream, you get a petrochemical industry or a chemical industry. And the end product is the petrol pump, where you see a common man get access to petrol or diesel. This is an overview of oil and gas industry. And you see, like, let's say how much of oil is being consumed a day across the world. 98 million barrels. That's the consumption per day across the globe. And I would say 40% of oil is consumed by America, China, India, and Japan. The rest 55% is by all other countries put together. And let's see who consumes the most. The 45% of consumption of 98 billion barrel is by light vehicles, that is cars and motorbikes, you and me driving across the roads. We are the major consumer of oil. 30% is by industries for electricity generation or for other industrial purpose, and 20% is free trucks. So you can imagine now what COVID has done to oil and gas industry. You would have heard the news like oil price has gone negative because 45% were locked and inside the room and nobody traveled in the road. So the oil demand went so low and the price has gone down. So we are the major consumer, like light vehicle are the major consumer of oil and gas industry. And then the biggest companies in oil and gas, the number one company, like based on 2019 report, is Sinopec. It's a Chinese company. Look at the revenue; it's $432 billion. That's the amount of revenue you're talking about. That the big oil companies they make. They are all called IOC, integrated oil companies. They own upstream, midstream, and downstream. They're major companies basically. I would say like Sinopec, Dutch Shell is Shell. You might have seen Shell petrol pumps. Saudi Aramco, BP, Exxon, Total, China, Chevron. These are the major companies across the globe. Now, what I have is a very simplified version of oil and gas facility. I picked up upstream oil and gas separation unit, and this is a very basic schematic. So if you see that leftmost side, you'll see a production manifold and look at the pressure that comes in around 200 bar. That's not the pressure in every case. It depends upon what the well pressure and temperature is. For this instant, we have picked up a number 200 bar and 100 degrees centigrade. The production fluid comes at, basically when you explore, the three-phase oil and gas and water mixture comes at 200 bar, 100 degrees centigrade. And it goes to the first equipment. It's called a production separator. This is where the gas, oil, and water mixture is separated into three different streams. So this separator, let's take the oil line. At the end of the separator, you see a thick black line going out with the markup shown like oil. When the three-phase mixture comes inside, because of density difference, and there are special inlet devices which separates gas, oil, water into three different streams. Because of density difference, the gas goes to the top, oil and water falls down. You will see detail when you go the later slides. I just quickly pick up the oil line. Oil first gets separated in the first phase of separator and then goes to the low pressure separator again. It's a repeat of first step. Again, further oil gas separation happens over there. And the oil is taken out. To transport crude to long distances, it has to be kept at a certain specified pressure and temperature. So you put it through a heat exchanger and then through a certain pump to push it through long distances. The oil goes out there. And then let's go and take the gas line. The gas line typically is subject to a cycle of scrubbing and compression. Scrubbing in the sense, you knock off, the gas has to be transported at a certain condition, like you can't have say 4 pounds of water per million cup of gas. Like you have to limit the water content in the gas when it is transported. So what we do is we knock off the liquid water basically in the gas, and then we compress it. Again, we cool it. Like there's 2 or 3 stages of compression happens over there. The gas is first compressed, knocked off, compressed or knocked off, and the gas is transported. That's a bit. I'm just roughly giving you a one-line sketch of how the gas line is treated or conditioned. And then the water is separated from the first stage separator. It's again taken out. The industry has got very strict marine regulations. We cannot dump water as it is into the sea. The oil level has to be kept to a minimum level. Like you can't have, say, 40 ppm of oil in the water dumped into the sea because it will affect the marine life. So we'll have to treat the water through hydrocyclones, where because of centrifugal force, the oil droplets are thrown out and just the water is taken out and dumped into the sea. This is a very skeleton, very basic sketch of oil and gas industry. I just thought I'll give an overview of this industry. Then overview of pressure equipment. So what is a pressure equipment and how it looks like? pressure equipment is a container. It is designed to hold gas or liquid at a pressure higher than atmospheric pressure. It has got no moving parts inside. It's basically a cylinder which is designed to hold a pressure, say, more than 1 bar gauge. Atmosphere is 1 bar. So anything that is stored more than 1 bar gauge is called a pressure vessel. It's a container basically, but it has got a lot to do in terms of design and fabrication, inspection and testing. It can be of two orientation. One is vertical and other is horizontal, basically flipping the way you support the equipment. A pressure vessel can be made up of any shape theoretically, but the industry usually limits it to cylindrical shape. The cylinder is called shell in technical terms, industry terms, and the end caps are called heads. End caps come in spherical or in elliptical shape. Usually the pressure ranges from 2 or 1 to 300 or 400 bar, depending upon your well fluid inlet condition. And yeah, this is a very basic overview of pressure equipment. I just thought I will have a small 3D picture of pressure vessel, the vertical one and the horizontal one. And the fluid comes in and goes out through a pipe connection, and flanges, it's again a circular plate with bolt connections or used to connect a pipe to your equipment through which you transport liquid in and out of the vessel. This is a sketch of horizontal vessel. If you see the end side, it's called elliptical head, 2:1, the ratio of the elliptical head. And those thick lines are all welding, which is used to attach the shell and head together. So what's the significance of pressure equipment? The equipment, they operate at higher pressure, internal pressure. A lot of energy is stored inside the equipment. Higher the pressure inside the equipment and bigger the size, the energy stored is very, very high. The event of rupture or any failure, the extent of damage or disaster is huge. Pressure equipment safety is very imperative in design. Let's see this one, a small exercise. A pressure equipment cooker is also a pressure equipment. So how would you find out a thickness of a pressure cooker which operates at 15 psig? Or the industry, a pressure cooker cannot exceed a pressure more than 15 psig. That's the norm. So if you have to design a pressure cooker of 15 psig, the plate material of 20,000 ksi and the diameter of the pressure cooker is 14 inch, please give a thought and see how you can design the plate thickness so that it can contain 15 psig pressure. We'll come back to this later. So we all think that pressure cooker is the simplest equipment, but home pressure cooker do explode. Woman in India was permanently blinded in her eye after a pressure cooker exploded. The full extent of injuries was not known until the CT scan was done. When they did the CT scan, they figured out that the vessel, the one which pops out when the pressure builds inside, has lodged deep inside her skull. She had to undergo a surgery to remove the vessel. Fortunately, she was saved, but she lost her eyesight. If you go to the website link there, you will find so many cases are being launched against pressure cooker manufacturers across the globe. So we are talking about a small cooker, which is of 4 to 5 liters capacity and the internal pressure less than 1 bar. So be aware such a low volume, low pressure equipment can cause a dangerous projectile. Then imagine what would happen if we're talking about the industrial equipment, which is operating at a pressure range of 1 bar to 300 bar gauge and volume is thousands of liters. It is disaster if any of this equipment fails. Let's see the history of pressure equipment. The picture, what you see is like Groover Company, it's a shoe factory, and the picture was taken at 7:45 a.m., 1905, March 20 in US. The next picture, what you see is like one of the boiler. I'm sorry, I just go back to the previous slide. This is a 4-story building, and there was a boiler in the lowest floor, probably the ground floor, which was not attended for some reasons. The boiler, its control mechanisms failed, it got overheated, and it burst through. The second slide shows the picture of boiler that flew away, touring all the 5 floors of the building. Just from the ground floor, it just bursted and it tore all the floors and flew away and falls somewhere near the city center. And that's the piece of boiler they found also a few hundred meters from the building. Needless to say, this incident caught the attention of government. This incident killed 100 over people and then damaged the property worth of $250,000. So much of injury. It's a disaster. And this caught the attention of government. And all prior to this incident, all the pressure equipment, all the boilers were made based on individual skills of engineering assessment. They used to do their own engineering calculations. There were no regulations or guidelines for design of boilers. It's all were finally up to the individuals, how they design and how they fabricate it. So this incident really made a huge issue in US, and they all recognized the need to have a proper code for design of, code in the sense rule book for the design of pressure vessels and boilers. So they approached ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, to come up with a set of guidelines. And I think 1900 somewhere, 1911 or 1912, ASME came up with a set of guidelines for the design of pressure vessels, unfired pressure vessels and boilers. That's how this ASME came into existence. ASME is the book which we use in industry for the design of pressure vessels and nuclear plants. There are so many rule books in ASME. For pressure vessels and boilers, unfired pressure vessels and boilers, we use Section 8, Division 1. The boiler explosions were common in 1800s. Thousands were killed across years. This shoe factory incident was a major one that kicked into the requirement of international uniform codes, and that's how ASME was created. So what does this ASME code defines? They define the rules for design, materials, fabrication, inspection and testing requirements. It's a set of rules. The ASME code book for pressure vessels is over 1,000 pages. It's all defined rules. When we do a design, we simply follow the rules. There is no thought process or there is no questions asked, just follow the guidelines so that the equipment is delivered in a safe condition. People have done a lot of research. They keep updating this ASME code every 3 years once or 2 years once. So a big committee is working behind the screens. On the industry side, we just follow the rules given in the ASME. So what are the international codes for boilers and unfired pressure vessels? In America, we follow ASME Section 8, Division 1 and Division 2. These are the two of the codes, something. ASME has got multiple codes, but for the pressure vessels and boilers, these are two design codes which we follow. UK has got PD 5500, Germany AD McBatter, Australia we use AS 1210. Similarly, every country has their own pressure vessel design codes like Belgium, India, China, and Japan. Vessel design. So like we saw how a pressure equipment, how disaster a failure can be. So the need of ASME, guideline. That's ASME made these design codes, and let's see what we do in the design of pressure equipment. What kind of loads we consider. Obviously, we'll have to design the equipment for the internal pressure, the pressure that is exerted by the fluid stored inside, and then external pressure. When you drain the fluid from the vessel, sometimes it creates a vacuum, like when you take out water too fast from your water can, it like pops in and out. That's okay with the water tank, but not with the pressure equipment in oil and gas industry. So you have to design for external pressure, self-weight, and then superimposed loads and wind and earthquake loads. And more than that, it has got fatigue, thermal design, local loads from piping connected. Just have a brief idea of what design loads we consider. And we saw this picture previously. The pressure components for pressure equipment is shell, head, and nozzle. These are the parts which are designed as per ASME design. Let's take a small example. Let's take a cylinder of 48-inch ID. The intention is to find what should be the thickness of the cylinder if it has to withstand a pressure. And ASME gives this formula, says like UG27Z is a rule number. Just ignore that number. Just See to that, to find out the thickness, the formula is PR by SC minus 0.6B plus CA. CA is corrosion allowance. As the fluid stays inside the container, it starts eating the material because of its corrosivity. So you always add some corrosion allowance, and 0.6P is a correction factor. Forgetting that out, T boils down to PR by SC. That's very familiar formula. It's like Hoops stress. Hoops stress is PD by 2T. So ASME has taken that PD by 2T and added a correction factor based on their analysis, and then added a correction allowance. So basically, the ASME formula is derived from Hoops stress. Hoops stress is a cylindrical longitudinal stress joints, which sees the most stress. And if I go back to the previous slide, there is something called E. E is the joint efficiency. That's determined by what type of joint. Joint, the sense like you roll a cylinder and weld it, right? So the welding has got, it might have some defects or it might have some porosity. So unless you do a complete thorough analysis of the weld, you'll have to add a safety factor design. That's what the joint efficiency is all about. After doing a welding, if you do a complete NDT and make sure 100% the welding is perfect, then E can be 1. If you don't do any welding, any NDT, then E can be 0.7. Basically, if the E goes low, 0.7, then the thickness goes high. Basically, they're building a margin in the thickness by lowering E values. So let's take an example, work out shell thickness. The plate material is 516 grade 70. It's an industrial terminology for carbon steel plate with 70,000 KSI ultimate strength. And if I consider 500 psi as an internal pressure and spot radiography, it means like I do random radiography, then the thickness is calculated as PR by SC minus 0.6P plus CA. Just feeding in the numbers here, we get thickness as 0.8473 inch. So to contain a cylinder of 48 inch ID at 500 psig with using a material of 70,000 ultimate strength, you need a thickness of plate 7 by 8 inch. So this is what we do in industry. Like when we get a project, when the client says, I want to design a production separator for 300 bar, a diameter of 3 meter by 8 meter length, we apply ASME formulas and calculate the thickness. And I'll quickly touch what all the materials other than carbon steel. Majority of material, the workhorse is carbon steel. Other than carbon steel, we do use a lot of stainless steel, austenitic, ferritic, duplex stainless steel. All these iron carbide diagram, what we study in college, this is the place where I find them applied largely. And also we use non-ferrous materials, aluminum, titanium, chrome nickel alloys. These are widely used industrial materials for pressure equipment. And there is something called clad steel. This is basically a combination of carbon steel with the overlay of corrosion resistant alloy. It can be stainless steel or any other CRA material. These are the types of materials that we use in industry for fabrication of pressure equipment. And now like pressure equipment in oil and gas industry. There are many types, but I just picked 4 majorly used types: heat exchangers, pressure vessels, column, and storage tank. Storage tank is not a pressure equipment, however, but I just included because they're a group of equipment which are widely used. They do have a certain pressure, less than 1 bar, but technically they are not a pressure equipment. So what the functions of this equipment? Heat exchanger is used to evaporate and condense. Basically, it's for heating and cooling. Pressure vessel can be a separator. Like previously we saw, like an oil and gas mixture comes in, a separator is used to separate oil and gas mixture into 3 different streams. Scrubber to knock off liquid in the gas stream. Filtrate, like you want to filter any debris or anything that comes along with the well fluid. Is again, it's a pressure vessel, but it has got specialty internals to filter. And then columns, it is distillation columns. These all also do a separation, but separation of products which are not by density difference basically by boiling them and taking out. And then the last is storage of pressure vessels and tanks. It's simply store. It stores of nothing much. Heat exchanger. They are the workhorse of refinery and oil and gas industry. There are multiple types of plenty variety of heat exchangers are available in the industry. I'll just pick two of them: shell and tube and air-cooled exchanger. Again, heat exchanger is also a pressure equipment. The shell is designed to ASME code, or depending on location, if in US ASME code, if in Australia is AS1210 code. Basically, it's a pressure equipment design. In addition to that, we also got a couple of standards. API stands for American Petroleum Institute. They got a couple of standards, and TEMA, Tubular Exchanger Manufacturers Association. All these are all like standards used for design of heat exchangers. What basically these standards says, like how to design, select the material, how to fabricate, inspect, test, and ship the equipment. Basically, these are all guidelines again used in the industry. What is the shell and tube exchanger is like? It consists of a shell, a large pressure vessel with a bundle of tubes inside it. One fluid runs to the tube, and other fluid flows over the tube, thereby exchanging heat between the two fluids. The set of tubes is called tube bundle. The types of tubes of many types, like twisted tubes, plain tubes, fin tubes. We mostly, the majority time, we use plain tubes. I'll just put up a sketch over here, diagram. You see the shell side fluid comes in at the top, shell fluid in, and it goes inside the shell. There are something inside the shell called baffle. Baffle is a circular plate which are holding the tubes in place, and also they divert the shell flow. The shell takes a S path when flowing through the shell fluid takes a S path when flowing through the shell, and it comes outside. Basically, the shell fluid is flowing over the tubes. And coming on to the tube side, if you see, there is a thick line, that's a plate, which is dividing the flow into two segments. Tube side comes in at the bottom, and there are plenty of tubes, enters the tube inside, goes inside. This is a U-tube bundle. It takes a U-turn and come out of the top. So the tube side fluid flows inside the tube. The shell fluid flows over the tubes, thereby both these fluids exchange the heat. Just a three-dimensional view of this similar sketch. I've got a video, let me see if I can play that.
A shell and tube heat exchanger consists of a bundle of tubes placed inside a larger tube, which is called the shell. The tube fluid, usually the process fluid, flows through the tubes in one direction. The shell fluid, usually the utility fluid, flows through the shell and around all of the tubes in the opposite direction. This is called a counter current.
I'm sorry, for some reasons the video is not playing. I think I'll go back to where we were. Sorry, the video is not playing. Stalin, can you play the video? Can you give a try?
Video, sir?
Hello?
Video is okay.
Yeah, can you try playing the video? I'm not able to play it.
Yeah, I will try.
Okay, thanks.
Can we start the video, sir? Shell and heat exchanger demonstration. Is it you are looking for?
Yeah. Yes. I'm not able to play the video.
Stalin sir, can I start?
And tube heat
I
exchanger
looked,
consists of a bundle
I've
of tubes
found the
placed
video.
inside the larger tube, which is called the shell. The tube fluid, usually
Okay,
the
nevertheless,
process
let me
fluid,
quit and
flows
just go
through
back
the
and
tubes in
go
one
this slide.
direction.
Probably these videos are on YouTube. Like if you have time,
The
Google
shell
out shell and
fluid,
tube heat
usually
exchanger
the
operation. It will
utility
give you a
fluid,
better idea.
Yeah,
flows through the shell
I think it is
and around
starting,
all
sir.
of the
It is
tubes
starting.
in the opposite
Maybe you can
direction.
wait for a few
This is called
seconds.
a counter-current design. The shell contains baffles to support the tubes and repeatedly redirect the shell fluid across the tube bundle.
Okay, Guru sir, is it okay? Can I play another video? Air-cooled heat exchanger.
Yeah, probably. I think I will go through the air cooled exchange slide and then we can try playing that.
That time.
Okay,
sir.
thanks. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, like the video is not playing. Please check out in Google if you have time. Plenty of
I
videos
think the
available.
video is still scrolling, sir, but it's not playing.
Okay, maybe
Hello?
I'll go on to the next slide. Yeah. Yes.
It is not
Okay,
a video.
okay,
it
please,
is a
sir.
slide.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, right. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, okay.
And again, like,
Okay.
yeah, there are, like, when we say the picture which I showed is a YouTube bundle, there are plenty of heat exchanger combination. You can see like the front end, you've got A, B, C, D. It's like bonnet, channel, removable cover, fixed cover. It's all like industrial configuration type. They call it as TMA, Tubular Exchanger Manufacturers Association. They have got worked out so many options and they put up what kind of heat exchanger you can fabricate for a particular service. It's basically selected by a thermal and mechanical engineer together. Front-end design, shell type, single pass or multiple pass or split flow, whatever way you want to design the flow, you can design depending upon your service. Then rear end. So a combination of heat exchanger can be BEU or BEM or AES or AET. You can do this combination. Multiple combinations are available. Again, this is more of an industrial selection guide. It's basically the selection is done by a thermal engineer who selects the design based on the process requirement and work with a mechanical engineer to figure out the difficulties that may arise during fabrication testing. And we work in iterations, like go back and forth and select which is the best configuration for a particular service. The second type of exchanger is air-cooled exchanger. As the name implies, the cooling is done by air. When we don't have a cooling medium like seawater or tempered water in a plant, when the temperature crosses too low, they use like air-cooled exchanger. That's the basis of going for air-cooled exchanger.
Guru sir, can I play the air-cooled heat exchanger?
Yeah, yes, Stalin, thank you. Please, if you can play the video, please. Thank you.
This cross-sectional view shows the two key air cooler components, the bundles and the fans. Looking a bit closer, we zoom into the air cooler bundle. Here we see the hot process fluid entering the bundle, and as the process fluid moves through the fin tubes, the process fluid's heat is taken away. The process fluid's heat is removed by using colder ambient air. The ambient air is directed over the fin tubes by fans. As the ambient air flows around the fin tubes, the air absorbs or takes away the process fluid's heat. This is just one of the many available air cooler configurations.
Okay, sir, you can continue. Continue this.
Yeah, I think some issues with the video upload. Okay, so this is how an air-cooled exchanger looks like. Shell and tube, the name comes from a tube bundle being inside a shell. In this case, the tube bundle is exposed to atmosphere, it's open, and it has got rectangular boxes at the ends, and the tubes connects both the rectangular boxes. If you see from the slide, Like the process fluid enters rectangular boxes, it is called header, and travels inside the tubes, take a turn at the end, and comes back at the out, shown in red arrow, just below the blue arrows. That's in and out of the process fluid. And there are big fans under the tube bundle. The fan pushes the ambient air through the bundles, and while the air travels through the bundle, it does a heat transfer, thereby reducing the fluid temperature that is flowing through the tube bundle. The video would have been better showing how the fans operate and how it looks like. Probably you can, again, sorry that the video is not playing. You can give a try later in Google and see how air-cooled exchanger functions. It's basically like the flow of air through the tube bundle, and air is being pushed by fans through the bundles. Okay. The video is not playing. And then these are two types of heat exchangers I wanted to share today, but unfortunately the video is not working. Let's move on to the next type. Vessels, we saw a lot about it. The major types are separators, scrubbers, distillation columns, and storage vessels. Again, vessels are built to ASME code. We had a discussion on that. I skipped this slide. We're running short of time. Separators. Okay, this is how a separator looks like. As we talked about previously, the purpose of this equipment is to separate oil and gas water into three different streams. The mixed phase inlet enters through the inlet device. Inlet device is vanes arranged in parallel. It's an open device. It's not a closed device container. It's open device. So when the three-phase fluid comes in, it strikes against the vanes, basically the blades, and falls down. It's a momentum breaker basically. And because of density difference, gas travels on the top side and goes out, and oil and water as a mixture falls down. The two-phase liquid you can see in blue color that falls down, and the arrow marks on the top shows gas going out. Taking the gas pot, the gas go through a sort of foam breakers depending upon what kind of well fluid you have. In a simple way, the gas travels and goes out at the top. You've got a demisting device. The name implies the purpose of device is to take out or knock out the water droplets in the gas. There's a water droplet size of 10 micron. 1 micron is 0.001 mm. So we're talking about removing 10 micron size of water particles in the gas stream. That's gas going out. Coming to the liquid phase, the liquid is a mix of water and oil, and we have got coalescer. Coalescer purpose is to make small oil droplets to grow together and make a bigger droplet. Because of density difference, oil floats on the top and falls onto the next chamber. You can see the aqueous there, and then it's a two-level process, two-step process. It's basically depending upon how much oil water ratio comes into it. It's based on that they give the residence time for separation. And then oil, because of coalescence, flows on the top and travels down to the hydrocarbon chamber, and it goes out. When oil goes out, we have to make sure the water content is very little. Usually we allow 10% of water in the oil. That goes for further separation and conditioning. The aqueous oil is the oil that is called produced water, produced from water, oil and gas mixture. That is again dumped into the sea. When it goes to the sea, it is 40 ppm allowed criteria, but the first stage of separation is usually 1000 ppm or 1500 ppm of oil allowed in water. So this is a very simple schematic of oil and gas separator equipment. The next is scrubber. The scrubber, as the name implies, is to knock out water droplets from gas. And the removal size, we're talking about 3 microns. When the gas go out of separator, it is 10 microns. And this one, just before going into the compressors for further compression system, we still knock out the remaining water droplet in gas, and the performance expected is 3 micron size of water particle removed. And there are a lot of specialized vendor in the market, internal suppliers, again, inlet momentum breaker and demisting device. So the vessel sizing is basically done based upon what type of internals you select and residence time required. Again, once the internals are selected and the vessel is sized up, then the mechanical design takes over. The last one is a distillation column. This one is used to separate compounds two or more mutually soluble solution by varying the boiling point. The crude is fed at the bottom and it is forced to flow through the trays. I keep heating the crude at a temperature of around 20 degrees centigrade. You get the LPG gas used to our cylinders. Keep heating. At 70 degree, you get chemicals. At 120 degree, you get petrol for cars. At 170 is jet fuel. Like the more you keep heating, you get different petroleum products. And this is one of the major equipment in oil and gas industry. This is widely used in refineries. The internals, I've tried to put a small 3D picture of how the internals looks like. Basically, it's a combination of trays, we call it as, and then a set of packings inside. And finally, it's like storage tanks. The purpose of storage tank, there is no process in it. It's basically a refined crude or product is stored into it. Some of the tanks might have a little bit of pressure inside, and they're again designed by API codes, API 620 and API 650. I think that's all I have today. Just try to cover as much as possible in 1 hour about pressure equipment. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Very good, Mr. Guru.
Yeah, thank you.
One or two questions they asked from the chat.
Okay.
Number one, what are the ways to prevent corrosion in the heat exchanger?
See, I would say what are the mitigations we can do for heat exchanger, either by selection of proper material,
Yes,
or by selecting the right design. That's why I said TEMA has got a combination of rear end type of front end and selection of flow, AET, AES. So you'll have to see what fluid goes in there, whether there is a crevice formation possible, and if the fluid can cause a crevice correction, then you'll have to select a different configuration of heat exchanger. So it's not a direct answer there, but yes, you can do by selecting proper material and proper TEMA type. We can always mitigate corrosion in heat exchanger.
exactly. Whatever you said is correct. Say an example, if water contain high chloride level, the corrosion testing indicates susceptibility towards putting corrosion, especially at high temperature. So it was suggested that controlling the chloride level and proper adjustment of pH and optimum solution to avoid corrosion in the heat exchanger pipes. So first, before going to send to the tubes, you must check it that the proper level of the fluid and what level of the fluid you are going to use in the heat exchanger before designing the heat exchanger. Another
correct. But if you are using stainless steel, then it has got corrosion, stress corrosion cracking because of chlorine level. That's why material selection is very important. If you have highly chloride content coming in, we don't use stainless steel in that. We can still use higher alloys in Inconel, which is good corrosion resistant for chlorine stress corrosion cracking. It's a combination of both.
And another question.
Yep.
The chat. And when corrosion takes place in cell and tube, what are the remedies used in cell and tube heat exchanger? Same thing.
I don't know that. You see, it's all first you have to see what is the process fluid coming in. Yes. If it is highly sulfur content, H2S content, then you are using carbon steel material. There are NACE requirements to ensure whether complying to NACE limits are exceeded by the material, or we'll have to go for a better material. If it is stainless steel, then we'll have to again see what is Hartley's limits to be followed. So it's very difficult to answer how to avoid corrosion in heat exchanger. It is a combination effect of selecting the right material, selecting the right design. That way we can make sure corrosion is mitigated.
Another question also, what type of corrosion takes place in heat exchanger? Same question they asked. See, whenever you calculate the corrosion factor, there's a fouling factor we are going to calculate in the design. If you use alcohol vapor, that fouling factor will be 0.0009 meter squared Kelvin per watt. If you used biofuel water, that fouling factor will be 0.002 meter squared Kelvin per watt. Fuel oil 0.0009 meter squared Kelvin per watt. So like that, there will be a range. Okay, if it is
Correct.
goes exceed that, then the heat exchanger is going to be failed. Okay, due to
No, that
absorbing more heat.
correct. But TEMA has got fantastic guidelines for selection of fouling resistors. Thermal design is the core of heat exchanger design. So when you do a thermal design of heat exchanger, all your fouling factors come into picture.
Okay.
Depending upon the service fluid, you select your fouling factor, and then you start from there. Then you end up selecting the material, and then comes the mechanical part of heat exchanger.
Any other questions? How to just a minute. So what kind of material used for storage tanks, like the last one questions?
Storage tank typically is carbon steel. Majority of material is carbon steel.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? I will go through the chat. Okay. Sir, cooler, because sun is remained. Nice presentation. Why ammonia is stored in spherical vessel?
I have no answer for that. I don't expertise in ammonia plants. Mine is purely in offshore upstream. Sorry for that.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your presentation. Very nice presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity. It is wonderful to get in touch with college students and share our knowledge.
Sir, Stalin sir,
Yes.
can audience can ask a question, sir, in this?
All the question I sort out and asked to the directly to the speaker, and he has answered. All
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, sir. Okay, okay.
This is the time for vote of thanks.
Okay, okay, okay. Please, sir. Please, Stalin sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all the participants. Now I share the link for sending your feedback form after the vote of thanks. So please be patient for 10 minutes, another 10 minutes. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor M.K. Surappa, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Anna University, Chennai, for giving this opportunity to conduct this online webinar. Thank you, sir. And Dr. N. Karunamurthy, Registrar, Anna University, Chennai, for his continuous support to conduct this program successfully. And I thank to Dr. S. Selladurai, Additional Registrar, Anna University, Chennai, for his support to our university. And the final, the dynamic and enthusiastic active network of our institute, the Dean, Dr. T. Sendil Kumar, University College of Engineering, VIT campus, Tiruchirappalli. Thank you, sir, for your support. And I thank Dr. S. Venkatesan, sir, HOD, for his constant support, because we started this program to propose it only 2 days before, mostly 3 to 4 days before. So within 4 days, we received almost 225 registered candidates, but now presently 103 are active. So anyway, I thank to all the participants as well as my HOD, my lovable HOD, Dr. S. Venkatesan, sir, and the organizing secretary, Dr. M. Arulmali, Professor, Department of Petrochemical Technology. Thank you, madam. Thank you for your support. And my department colleague, all department colleague, thank you to all. And my colleague coordinator, Dr. M. Rangasamy, and Dr. K. Kumaraguru, and all the faculty members from our department. And thank you to the all faculty and non-faculty in our college and in our department for your continuous support. And finally, I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. Guru, for your busy schedule from Australia. You are given the time and spend your time to give some knowledge about the pressure equipment. Thank you, Dr. Guru Tiaga. Thank you once again. Thank you to the all. Anything you want to say, sir? Dr. Venkatesan, sir?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Guru Tiaga, sir. Thank you for your
So sorry,
wonderful
I
lecture.
am not a doctor. Sorry to interrupt. I'm not a doctor. I'm just an engineer. So please.
That is
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
No.
Okay.
It's
Now
doctor
Thank
is
you
like
very
lot
much,
of
sir.
hardships.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you everyone for attending the webinar.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Now I
Thank
share
you.
the link for your feedback. Please, the link has been shared for all the participants. Please put your feedback. We will send the certificate within 2 days to your mail ID. Participants, sir, Venkatesan sir,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
can you able to see the link in the chat? I sent it 2
I have
times.
muted the video. Maybe I will switch on the video. Yeah. Tell me, sir.
Yeah, I have sent the link, feedback link to the chat.
Okay.
Have you seen that? Have you seen
1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah, it is there, sir.
Thank you. I can also thank to all the participants.
I think people are responding. I think participants are responding.
Yeah. One participant, Nagarajan Aramugan. Thanks to Dr. Rangaswamy sir, Dr. Venkatesan sir, Almali madam, Kumaroguru. Thanks to Stalin sir, this webinar. Nagarajan Aramugan, Alumni of our institute. Thank you all.
Okay. Yeah, we got some good feedback also, sir, in this. You can see that.
Yeah, thank you. So any participant in the chat, can you able to access my link what I shared to you? Please send your answer through chat.
Stalin and Venkatesan sir, like I just made this presentation for mostly for mechanical background engineers, not specific for PCT department. I know you know much more better than a mechanical engineering team. So if you want any specific topic, please let know. We can do a seminar, webinar
Yeah, in future we will consider your sir.
Yeah.
I will arrange a specific for petrochemical engineering. Then you can do more design about like
Exactly.
all the
Yeah.
petrochemical equipments. Any participant, please give your feedback through chat whether you got my link which I shared to you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Whether you got my link, any participant, please reply. My feedback link. Thank you, Dr. V. Mohan, to please explain. First, one thing I forgot to tell the thanks. The supporters for conducting this webinar, Dr. Mohan sir and Dr. Chandra Segar sir. Thanks to Dr. V. Mohan, Triple Professor, GS Engineering College, and Dr. Chandra Mohan, CEO, GS Engineering, for their support. Thank you, Dr. M. Ilayaraja. Saravanan Jagannathan, yes, I got it. Filled it, sir. Thank you. Dr. V. Sivaramakrishnan, EGS Engineering College. Feedback submitted, sir. Thank you. Mohan, nice presentations. So thank you, Guruji. Guru,
Thank you, Stalin.
are you in the line?
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. We'll close the session.
Okay, thanks. I'm leaving.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And Dr. Venkatesan, sir. Dr. Venkatesan,
Sir, please, sir, tell me, sir.
Yeah, we can close the session, sir. Thank you for your full support. Thanks to our
Okay.
people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for organizing.
Yeah, most of the
Thank
people,
you.
they said they are finished the feedback form. Dr.
Okay,
E.
okay.
Gomadi madam, sir, feedback link is please. Now
Okay,
it's
okay.
again I will send.
Okay. It is there in the chat section.
It is there in the chart room. I think everybody can, there is a blue link, blue lengthily it has given, University College of Engineering Bid Campus. Some
Yes,
Google Forms is there, they can access.
Gomati madam, please reply your answer whether you got it or not. Dr. E. Gomati madam.
Maybe they scroll down, they can see that blue lines written form. Once they click in, they go inside their feedback form.
Gomati madam, I have sent it again. Please, you got it or not? Please send your chat whether you got it or not. Again, madam, no, sir. Again, I have sent it to the chat. Dr. Komati, madam, I will send it to your WhatsApp. You can fill it up, madam. If you are not get it in the chat, then I will send it to your WhatsApp.
Okay, then we will wind up the session, sir. Maybe I can quit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Venkatesan, sir. Most of the people, they said they got it, except Dr. E. Gomati madam. Gomati madam, whether you got it or not, I will send it through your WhatsApp also. Please reply. Thank you, Dr. Komati madam. You got it. Thank you. Thank you for your reply. Now, I will close the session. I thank all the participants. Thank you for your cooperation. Thank all the students. God bless you all. Now I will close the session. Thank you.